We should have our own musical like Celino and Barnes.
Yes, exactly.
Play.
Oh, no,
Although
that's coming. That's
it's a
coming to
play.
off-Broadway, right? I
It's
know.
already on Off Broadway.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
No, it's not a musical, so it's a play, but I think it's a good title. I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write about theater for the New York Times and the Washington Post, among other places.
And I'm Peter Marks, ex-critic, and now theater ambassador at large.
It's the best
we
title
are.
ever.
Thank you. Here we are with another. I try to come up with a new one every time. Here we are with another episode of Marks and Vincentelli, a podcast in which we talk about theatrical things like cats, but we don't eat them.
No, we don't eat cats. We don't eat dogs either.
Right.
We're even though I am an immigrant.
Oh my God.
I want to reassure.
Yes, but you're a. Yeah, but are you a naturalized citizen?
I am, but I am from France, where we do eat frogs, which something that Trump didn't think about. So.
Oh my God.
Okay,
That's
I
a
don't
very
wanna-
good point. They
There you
needed
go.
a Corsican moderator.
That's right.
Well, my daughter is a professional dog trainer, and she'll be relieved to hear that we're not consuming cats and dogs. But Elizabeth,
Okay.
let's tell people what's up for today.
Okay, today's guest is, I would say, one of the greatest contemporary American playwrights. That sounds like hyperbole, but I truly believe that. It's the Tony Award-winning, one-time MacArthur Genius Fellow. This is the grant I want to win, by the way. Branden Jacobs-Jenkins. His comedy/drama Appropriate earned the Tony for Best Revival of a Play just in June, a few months ago. And the star, Sarah Paulson, also won a Tony. So it was a good evening for Appropriate.
Yeah, indeed. And so let me tell you, this is a freewheeling episode.
Oh.
You're going to want to hear Branden holds forth on all matters theater. You'll hear him talk about the work he's put in getting a Broadway production at last with Appropriate, and about other of his plays, including The Comeuppance, which premiered last year in New York and is now getting an important production at DC's Woolly Mammoth Theater. What else?
And my God. Okay, this is seriously, like, who else but us do podcasts like with in-depth discussions with playwrights like Branden of
Right.
this caliber? Nobody. That's
Right.
who's doing. No other
True.
problem. So we're also going to go back a little bit with him. He's going to talk about some of his groundbreaking plays, like An Octoroon, which was a modern riff on a 1859 slavery drama by Dion. Is it Dion or Dion? It's Boucicault. Dion Boucicault, which actually was the first play by Branden that I saw. It was 10 years ago. And we just mentioned some of them. He's just absolutely, yes, he's one of my favorite playwrights. I'm gushing. Please stop me now. I know. I'm fangirling.
yeah.
I'm
It's
fangirling.
okay. Yeah, that's you're fangirling. Got it.
Fangirling,
It sounded like you said fingerling, which is a potato.
Oh my God.
Anyway,
This is going to be a hot one.
Yeah. All right, so let's get this conversation going. Welcome, Branden Jacobs-Jenkins. It's thrilling to have you on our show. We've wanted to have you on for a long time, and it's great to see you here. So thank you.
Thank you. It took so long. I didn't know this.
Right.
No
What
one
the
told
hell
me.
took so long?
I know. What took so long?
That's right. It's Elizabeth's fault. So
I
listen. So we're going to start. I mean, there's a lot that we could cover, Branden, and we won't. We don't want to we don't want to have you here all day. But we have a lot of interest from a lot of listeners in talking to you. You've had such an amazing run for the last few years, culminating in the Tony for Appropriate, which was thrilling to watch for me. And having loved that play for so long, seeing it so beautifully realized with so many great performances, and for it to be a success. Maybe you can just talk. Maybe we should just start right there, Branden. What was that experience like for you? Was it what you imagined for the play, even when it was running in regional theaters and off Broadway? Was the trajectory to Broadway always sort of in your own fantasy of where this play would go?
In short, no. I mean, I feel,
Right.
I feel like when I started writing it, like what, 12 years ago now, there's probably some, like Pollyanna-ish vision in my emerging mind that somehow Broadway would make itself open to a young playwright of color at that time in some way that was successful. And I obviously let that go. And but I remember even as we were working on that initial kind of run of the show, we tried to like do all these. I was really interested in like the August Wilson method because I'm convinced that's actually the only way to really make new plays work. And we had like 4 different out of town tryouts, and then we finally got to New York, and it did really well. I mean, you, Peter, you saw honestly, I think that maybe the first thing of mine that you actually reviewed at the Woolly Mammoth Theater in DC. But it did well as far as plays go. I mean, it was controversial. I think some people now want to say that it was ahead of its time or whatever. But it went on. I felt like it was a success. It kind of changed my life, honestly. That play, that and my play Octoon, which kind of premiered at the same time. But I really, truly, never, ever thought ever that it was going to come back in this way and kind of receive what I think a lot of people are calling its definitive production, which is like a total blessing for me, and I was very happy to not, I literally, for all I knew, was going to live my life doing what I do, happily doing what I do, and never see that play again. And so, it really kind of felt like icing on icing somehow. That whole experience,
It does feel a little like the culture moved toward you, like you were the head of its time aspect, but the play found its space in our zeitgeist. It really became, and I think in some ways spoke, to a wide swath of audience. It wasn't for a quote unquote, narrow, intellectual theater audience. It became, I think, the conversation really has broadened, and this play really just settled naturally into that space that we were all sort of exploring more and more in our consciousnesses.
Yeah, I mean, what a treat to hear that. I think it had a lot to do also with just the experience of moving through life and now being someone in the shadow of middle age, and there was a generational thing kind of happening too, right? I think I was sort of talking about things that were maybe seeds culturally at that time that definitely took root, especially over the last I mean, we're talking the day after this debate, but the last
Right.
several several years we've witnessed a real just cellular transformation of the American conscious around these ideas, So yeah, what a treat for me to kind of got in early without even realizing it, I guess, on some level.
But I think also the play is very effective because it very deliberately, or at least I think it's deliberate. I'm pretty sure you know what you're doing. That
Thank you.
It
Tell your
uses
friends. Tell your friends.
it uses this tropes of melodrama very, very consciously, like the long buried secrets, the family that tear each other apart. It's very there's plot twists, really old fashioned plot twists, big reveals, and was that what again? Yeah, it's clearly, how are you using that? How are you bending those elements for your purposes?
Yeah, I mean, this play and an Octoroon, I mean, really all my plays are kind of rooted in this kind of project I was working through at the time about trying to unpack what American drama is, what makes drama American. And, one of the things that you kind of hear again and again as you read critically, the things that talk about this is that we're very good as the American, the family drama. That's the thing we're good at. We're good at musicals and we're good at family dramas. And we have a really rich tradition kind of spread across all people and stripes. I mean, predominantly the ones we think of are written by white identified men who are dead. But there's I guess I decided I wanted to study deeply how these plays worked, and I wanted to kind of make the art. I mean, I realized no matter what I touched, that because I'm Black identified, it's going to make it political. So I wanted to figure out what's the most interesting thing I can touch and sort of make people self-conscious about it or something. You know, I think like these I don't know if I would be uh you know, cited for a self-conscious use of tropes if I hadn't been black. You know, I think what we
Right,
know is
right.
that, you know, Jez Butterworth does it every time he comes to Broadway. You know,
Right.
he's like a play
But
like The Ferryman is super old-fashioned, you know, and yet it's not
I
quite
think
he's not quite talked about in that way. It's I mean,
mhm.
I actually kind of own it now and think it's interesting. Part of what I get offered as a writer, but it feels like there's always a kind of dance with this idea of taking something that doesn't belong to me, you know, as I work in this tradition.
Oh, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it like that at all. I mean, I didn't mean to infer that you're taking something that does not belong to you, because, like, if you look at, oh my God, like all kinds of literature, those are like classic themes that are used, all around the world. But they
I didn't hear
are,
it like that, though. I didn't hear either of you. I mean, I don't think that was what Brandon was responding to anyway. So I think you were,
oh,
you
well,
know,
no, that's good. No, I think it's interesting when conversations also are misunderstood
Hmm.
or misunderstood, or kind of going around. I don't think everything has to be like, I think interviews these days are just so like polished and clean, and there's no
Yeah.
room for ambiguity and people saying, well, that's not what I meant, but this
Hmm.
is what
Yeah. I'm sorry. I
interests
didn't
me.
perceive any insult in what you said. I think, you know,
Oh,
this notion
okay.
of just sort of self-consciously deploying these things, it's like, well, these are the kind of elements that make up what we think of as commercial Broadway. I mean, this is what
Well,
there's
yes.
unfortunately no Richard Foreman on Broadway yet. There's no anyone who's sort of pushing at these sort of,
Well,
you know, the naturalization of certain melodramatic
no, that's
things.
exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't know why I was thinking about that recently, but like, there was a time when Marat Sad was on Broadway. So
Hmm.
really,
Oh my
well, it
God.
was a
I
long
would
time
love for
ago.
there to be a revival of like high modernist, unfortunately the
I
only way we can get Waiting for Godot is with like Bill and Ted. You know, um that just says more about, you know, the moment we're living in terms of
yeah.
that part of our world, you know.
What would be some of
Um
the plays that you like to see, like when you're talking about like a revival of high modernist? Like what kind of
oh my
stuff are you
God.
thinking about?
Oh, sweet Jesus. I mean, I no, I'm like on the spot. So like,
Like like
I think I feel sometimes like what we haven't had is like a very, you know, we tend to sort of stop at like, in Chekhov as like our safety.
oh
You know,
yeah.
even when we stray into O'Neill, it's treated as like a little weird and like a risk. Like, are we gonna
Mm-hmm.
sit through 4 hours of longest journey? Like, maybe we should just put this hairy ape in like a big armory upstairs and paint everything yellow. You know, I think
Mm-hmm.
that like we don't
which
really
happened.
do,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
happened, which was an
Right.
amazing production too, and should have been
Right.
on Broadway, but was it? You know, but like I think The Maids by Genet would like
I was
actually
gonna
play
say.
well with
Yeah.
the right now amazingly, or like there's some weird Ionescos that I kind of wish I could, like Bald Soprano, like a really juicy production of Bald Soprano would make people go insane. They would lose their minds, you know. I'm trying to think what I think of high when I think of like high modernists, it's always these like
But
those
that gives
guys,
a good
but
example. That's a good. But actually,
yeah.
okay, I am completely like not following my. I'm not following the script at all. But so like a few years ago in 2017, 18, they had announced there was an announcement that you were supposed to work on a revival of Ananya of the people with
Oh
Thomas
yeah. Hmm.
Ostermeyer. So that was announced. That would have been your Broadway debut. That was like years ago. So that
Yeah.
didn't happen. Had you started work? Because I remember at the time the idea of you working with Thomas Ostermeyer filled me with
Hmm.
glee. I was so happy. I was like, I'm so looking forward to that show. Well, it ended up not happening. But like, had you actually did you guys like
Yeah,
start
there's a
working on that?
draft.
There
Yeah,
is.
there's a draft of that. Yeah, that is now so wrapped up in rights issues, it'll never probably see
Oh,
the
is
light
that
of
what it
day.
was?
Yeah, I mean, it was, Thomas went on to do that production with another writer in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
to not much success this past spring as well. So,
Right.
but, but you know, there was a kind of interesting Well, I don't want. I mean, how gossipy do we get on this podcast? I don't
Oh,
even know.
please
But like,
do it.
It's the most salacious
yeah,
podcast on the web.
Michael Riedel's grandchild is this
Oh
podcast.
my
Oh my
God.
God.
Tell us everything.
Oh my God! Let's
And
not,
and
not
then I
Michael
will tell
Riedel,
all
but-
my tales of going on ski trips with Michael Riedel, which are
Oh my
Oh God.
God!
Let's not go there,
Um,
please.
yeah.
You know, I would say that I would say a couple of things derailed that. One was definitely COVID. You know, I would say ironically, I won't tell too many tales at school, but I had come on there was already a star attached, and that star was then canceled. And then the next star we attached got canceled. So it's in this hilarious wave of like actor liability, you
Ooh.
know. And at the same time, there was these interesting, I spent some time in Germany, and I actually I was in residence at the Schaubühne, which is Thomas Theater, and there was an interesting friction that began to emerge that was not aggressive, but it had to do with American and European points of view on racialized casting. It was very interesting, and then. Yeah, it was, and then I also, I now on the other side of that experience, also it was also kind of the height of Evo, and there was just a real kind of like fetishization of like a European sensibility and aesthetic on the stages, while simultaneously, I would say on the side of that, there was this other conversation happening. I would notice in the UK and elsewhere about American playwriting, that there was this kind of golden age of American playwright. I'm thinking of like a lot of my colleagues like Amy Herzog and Annie Baker and Dominic
Baker.
Russo, and it was this weird moment where those two kind of fetishes were touching, and it just people kind of didn't know what to do with the different premiums that those people brought to the process. It was very interesting, but I worked so hard on it. We did these crazy readings on it. I still kind of am sad that probably no one will get to see it, but that's how it happens, I guess.
Oh, well,
It's interesting. It's interesting because, the last time The Maids was done in New York, I think it was Isabelle Huppert and Kate Blanchett. So, it really is, if a star, takes a hankering to one of those great pieces that we really need, that's what drives, that can drive the conversation. And you're seeing it this year. I mean, you're seeing it over and over again with, all these movie people flocking to Broadway with their own pet projects, whatever they are. You lucked out because you got a great actress in appropriate. I mean, you had a great cast, but Sarah Paulson was, it was like the moment, she met the moment so perfectly. Her own rigor, being attached to that piece. Really just sort of pushed it to that next level of
I don't
acclaim.
think it's unfair to anyone to say that she's the reason why it happened. I mean, she read the play and she said, I want to do this, and she really fought for years. I mean, it was during COVID that she signed on.
Amazing.
She kept clearing her schedule. She was very adamant about doing this play in a way that I have never had that experience before. Because the truth is, at that level, an actress like her is part of the wind in the sails. You actually have to have that for the most part, or something, like that to get there. And she was, she did producer level work, in my opinion, for a long time. And that kind of devotion from an actress doesn't happen with just anyone in Hollywood. I mean, I think that the dirty secret of that success is that everybody on that stage was a theater actor. Even Corey Stoll, who, the world thinks of him as the villain in Billions, but I've been seeing him on stage for years, and I've seen it at Shakespeare, and
Me too, in the park.
Yeah,
it wasn't just
everywhere.
about it wasn't just about TV actors. It was about people who started in the theater, coming back to the theater, and having chops and wanting to show those chops off. And that's just not everybody in Hollywood, But yeah, The Maids. Kate Blanchett, of course, was one of the most intelligent actors in Hollywood. Of course, she's going to do The Maids, But there's a couple people I wish you could convince to do The Maids who probably wouldn't know what to do with it if they hadn't, read to them out loud. So I don't know. It's very. That's just real. I'm just being real. It's
No.
People like Sarah are actually total unicorns in that regard.
So why can't you find? Why couldn't? I mean, Octoroon is such a great play. And in many ways, it feels to me like, now that you've opened the door and you've got another play coming to the Hayes in February proper.
Yep.
A purpose. Why can't, who can you snare for Octoroon, which is an amazing, it's an amazing, fusion piece. I mean, that taking Boucicault from an 1859 play, and finding its contemporary, uproarious contemporary connections. It feels like it's an actor's dream.
I'll be honest that we were actually approached about right before Appropriate. I was approached about bringing Octoroon to Broadway. We really went down the road with it, and we ultimately pulled out, me and Sarah Benson, because we didn't feel safe in the machine of marketing and the ways that people thought about the stars. And
got it.
It felt, I'm sure I've actually had lots of sweet young actors say to me, like, please call me you're doing Octoroon. But it's one of those pieces where you can't, the lesson I really had hammered home for me about Appropriate is Broadway audiences are actually quite radical by definition, in the sense that you don't control who shows up. There are people who come because they go to Broadway plays. There are people who are staying at a Marriott down the hall, and the concierge said, go see this play. There are people who are fans of Sarah Paulson who have no idea what they're walking into. So you're getting really people, in some ways, with the widest variety of interests and investments in being there, And I think you can't quite do any kind of work safely in front of some people who are willing to walk in with no context. And I sometimes get worried that an Octoroon can be that play, without the right. But listen, who knows? I mean, the world continues to change, but yeah.
And I think actually the audience is very important in an Octoroon, because I remember seeing it at Soho Rep, and then going back to the when it was remounted at the Theater for a New Audience. And I really could feel like the audience as an organism reacting very differently. The first time, the laughter was just like people were, I just remember, like, it was laughter, but it was also a laughter of delight. I remember like just chuckling to myself and thinking, I can't believe I'm seeing this. Laughter of happiness at what I was seeing. I'm like, this is great. And then at yeah.
I'm just going to say, Lincoln's getting a blowjob on Broadway every night.
Oh,
that's
okay.
That's true. It took me a minute.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it's selling out.
I know, but that's because Cole is insane.
Peter is referring to "Oh Mary," which is a big hit, which is great.
It's a huge hit.
I'm just saying, like as Brandon's saying, you can't get a little, you can't get more subversive than that. So I think we do underestimate, what the intelligence of the theater goer, even if it's like, as you say, from people from, the 17th floor of the Marriott are just, tripping down to something that they have to see.
That's totally fair. Point taken. I do think, though, that Cole is a television personality. People are coming in because they know I'm going to see Cole be funny in his weird Cole way, and it gets through word of mouth. I don't think people are coming to Oh Mary who are there for a serious night of like wrestling with the legacy of I think it's a slightly different vibe. So, but it's true. Like you never know. But at the end of the day, you're trying to find partners in these producers in theaters who you think get the play. And we just had like a really bad meeting with someone who is now no longer in the theater, but it was dark. It was a dark experience. We were like, we could just see the daily news, and we didn't want it. But
oh boy,
yeah.
Should we go back? I was going to say, let's go back a little bit, because I usually really hate origin stories. I really do. I'm not interested in the psychology of whoever. I guess that's high modernist of us. We don't care why they got to where they are. But in this case, I'm actually interested in how you got to where you are. So I would love to get your origin story We can do
Yeah.
a little flashback,
Oh my God.
narratively a
Um,
shoehorn flashback.
well, tell me where you want me to start. I guess my
What
fear is I suddenly take up the whole hour to tell
did
the
you?
story
But
of my family's
like for
origin.
instance, like were you a big reader?
I was a huge reader.
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a huge reader. I mean, I was just kind of an indoor kid. I wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason. I mean, I grew up in DC, grew up in an area called Tacoma. I was growing up in DC during a not particularly safe time to be a Washingtonian. This is what I think we were the murder capital of the world for a couple years running. And so you didn't really like hang out outside all the time. You really went to school, you did after school things. And I don't know, I just spent a lot of time with books. And
Mm.
in the summers, I would spend with my grandparents in a town called Camden, Arkansas, which is a former paper mill. And my grandmother I'd read all day, I'd watch TV, but she was like an amateur playwright. So this is like my first
Mm.
taste of drama. And she'd write these plays for her church. And I would she had to drag me to rehearsals. And I wouldn't know what was happening, but I'd be half aware. And I remember her I remember going to sleep and hearing her typing her scripts, with her typewriter. So that was like my first that's when the theater entered my, space in some ways. And then as I got older, I just sort of did. I thought I was going to be a writer. I wanted to write novels. I wanted to write stories. And I started reading the New York when I was 13, which is humiliating. And but in terms of high school, I did like theater in high school. And
Mm-hmm.
DC at the time had a lot of money that they poured into youth arts programs. And so in the summer, there were like three rival youth theaters, so, and I did one called Wildwood Summer Theater, which was like maybe the hippiest of them all and least professional. But, Otto Langston Wood
Oh
grew
yeah.
up in the same, yeah, I remember I would watch him in his shows and trying to think of other people like the Gardner brothers, who maybe you would know about in DC a bit more. Anyway, so it was a whole generation of us who were, you know, doing theater in that way. And DC was also a major kind of stop on the touring circuit. So we would see some of the New York things that came through and came to the National Theater. We had the Arena Theater, which was major. So that was always kind of a dress up occasion. My family would see every Wilson play that happened basically at the Arena Theater. And I had a kind of big watershed moment. My family, they were not theater people at all. They were weirdos, like they were cultural people. But my dad definitely came from the generation of like, if something black came through town that was cultural, you went out and you saw it basically. And
Mm.
there was a production of Waiting for Godot that happened at the Studio Theater. It was a colorblind cast production of Waiting for Godot that Peter, I'm sure, saw and reviewed. But it was a huge controversy. I mean, it was. I think Becca Estate maybe tried to shut it down, and so it was
They
in the
did.
news. They did. Yeah.
They
Did they
threatened it, and
successfully?
then they rescinded it. They rescinded it. There
Yeah.
was an intervention, but yes, because it was two black actors, and they just didn't feel that was appropriate, so
Yeah,
to speak.
and they were speaking the way they speak, but they were being accused of changing the language. It was very weird. But my family, my father was like, "We're gonna see this." And so I went. I think I was like 12, maybe 12 or 13 years
Oh
old. I
my
saw.
God!
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Peter, but it was a while ago. It was a long time ago though. And my parents like a matinee, and my parents kind of promptly fell asleep. Like just like they did not, they didn't know any. They were high modernism. They were like, "What are we talking about?" But I was awake and alone in this experience of Godot. And it was the most tremendous experience of my life because I was the whole time my brain was alive with like, what am I looking at? What is
Mm.
this?
Mm.
And that's when I began to sort of like wonder about. That's my first taste of professional theater that close in some way. And in that weirdness, I was like, oh, theater can be weird like this. It isn't just people in Pittsburgh talking about life. So, so in college, so in high school, I did a bunch of random stuff, did stuff in the summer. I wound up going to college and again, thinking I was just going to be a novelist or whatever, poet or whatever. I I basically took a playwriting class and out of the blue, and this guy named Robert Sandberg, legendary teacher there. And I just, something made sense, like something clicked for me, where I
Mm.
Mm.
was like, oh, there's something about the theater that I like have absorbed kind of, through osmosis and
Mm.
storytelling and the stuff I made, I could tell at the time was interesting to people, And he really encouraged me to pursue it, and I really resisted it. And I thought I was going to be an academic, and I thought I was going to write novels. And I wound up going to graduate school at NYU for something called performance studies, which at the time was very people didn't trust it. Now, of course, every school has the performance studies department, but
Sure.
it was. I just suddenly felt like there was something in that it was for me that I needed to. And the only people to study playwriting with that I knew about at that time was Paula Vogel, and I just thought like, oh, she's never gonna let me in, Though I met her when I was 19, and she always brings it up. But anyway, so went to grad school, kind of resisted it. I thought I was going to be a performance artist. I moved to New York, and I'm seeing all this incredible stuff at like PS 122 in the kitchen, because that's really what I could afford. Like I could afford downtown things. I was living downtown on like Bleecker Street, and I could never find the money to take myself to see the things that were happening basically above 14th Street. And so that was really my like lesson in my like sentimental education was like, Worcester Group, Young Jean Lee's theater company was kind of rising, was emerging at that moment. These sort of companies that don't really exist anymore, like Radio Hole and, what are they
Adobe?
called? What's Adobe?
Adobe.
Oh, you didn't know Adobe? Okay, it's a little later, maybe.
No, yeah. Well, there's a million, but that was the world I saw myself, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And meanwhile, I was a studio assistant to this performance artist named Claude Wampler, and basically, I had a moment where I was like, I think I have to choose theater over performance art, Claude. And she was like, that's fine. And she gave me this great advice. We were in Switzerland, like installing this sculpture she was doing. And she said, just grow a beard, lie about your age, and find your tribe. That was her 3 pieces of advice.
They're good. They're good. I love that, except the part about growing the beard. But other than that, I think
no,
universal.
It was very sweet. And sorry, it's such a rambling story. I'm sorry. So then by that point, I had a good job because I decided not to be an academic. And I randomly was hired, very randomly, got a job at the New Yorker in the editorial department, and specifically in the fiction department. And it was truly, truly coincidence that if you work in the fiction department at that time, you were an assistant to the editor of John Lahr and Hilton Alf. And when they found out I had this like theater thing, they were like, what? They were truly like, what is that? But truthfully, my first real mentors in the field were these 2 kind of excellent critics, very different people, but they would send me to see shows, and I would hear about things I thought they would like, and I'd give it to them. And they really taught me, ironically, a lot about, I think I was very much hiding my playwriting, ambitions, but I learned like so much about so much. Just watching John think out loud, and the conversations he would have with me about, like Wally Shaw, like these Sam Shepard plays I would idolize that he actually saw the productions of, and watching Hilton kind of find his way as a critic was interesting because he really had he kind of came into it sideways, and watching him kind of like figure out how to be a critic was just cool to watch, And on the weekends I'd write a play, and that play was called Neighbors. And eventually the public theater said we want to do it, and I quit my job and was lambasted by every critic in New York, and then moved to Berlin, and somehow woke up with new plays I'd written.
How did you survive that?
Survive what?
You just went over a very key biographical bit of data that you had this horrific journalistic reaction to your work, and then you fled to Berlin.
How did I survive?
How did you How did your ego stay intact?
Oh man, well, barely, just barely. I would say that I don't think you guys surveyed that, so I'm hoping I'm not walking into a trap here. But but okay,
no, didn't.
The truth is that part of why it was really complicated was we've been promised it wouldn't be open to critics, and they kind of forced it open because someone had leaked. I think they'd leaked the script to a journalist at the Times who had decided to write an article about it. It was. It's Mark Ravenhill, actually, a British playwright.
Sure,
was the first playwright I spoke to after I'd had that experience. And he said something which maybe critics don't want to hear, but he was like, I think he said to me, based on what you're doing, I think I would feel weird if you'd gotten rave reviews. because Neighbors was a very, I think, openly controversial thing, you know? And granted, it was me sort of like, I first of all wrote that play, never think it could be produced, but I was sort of pulling in the ideas that I'd been exposed to that I realized the average theater goer had not had any experience with yet. And so there was a kind of like gulf between what the play was doing and what a lot of people were coming and experiencing, you know? And in some ways I was like critiquing representation in theater, and critics must know that you are in some ways some of the most meaningful meaning makers of the work that happened. And I think that people took it personally. They took that play personally. Anyway, but he was saying, like, you know, this is the guy who like invented in your face theater moment with Phil Kane. He was like, just keep writing. Like, no one will think about it in 3 years. You know,
Right.
and what you're doing
Right.
is just going to take a minute for people to understand. Just relax. You're going to be fine. And it was true. He was absolutely right. You know, and I was great to move to Berlin because I kind of needed new ideas. I needed to be around new ways of making things. I needed to be inspired and feel good about the theater. Because I think it's very easy, especially when you're young and you're kind of conflating your failures or successes with the theater as a whole loving you or not. You know, it's easy to get very jaded and bitter in a way that actually makes work that's not healthy. You know, there's an assumption people want to see how bitter you feel. And I wanted to get away from that because I felt I could feel that slippery slope, you know, quite easily. And I wanted to kind of reconnect to an idea of theater that was nourishing to me, or that it took me a minute to like really just like understand like why theater is so great, you know, because it's about more than what happens in a given season. And you have a whole tradition to pull from. And so anyway, I spent a couple years in Berlin just like reading and writing. And I came back and I had a first draft of Appropriate, actually, is what I had, and some other pieces of things.
You know, at that key moment, Branden, who do you trust? You know, you're trying to find, you know, a new path. Obviously your plays, you know, it's, you know, there is nobody else who could write your plays. That's a wonderful distinction. But how do you trust that you've got something at that point? I mean, are there people in your life who are going to, you know, read it and say things that are going to help, or do you just forge ahead on some, you know, some personal belief?
You know, I think a few things happened to me actually that I think I definitely had a period where I was like, I'm never going to write again. I mean, this is not it. I need to go to law school. I need to figure something else out. And, you know, it's easy to just hear negative feedback, but the truth is, you know, for all the criticism Neighbors got, it totally sold out. You know, people came back 3 or 4 times. And I was like, there's something about that I need to look at. That someone out there is connecting and they're having the experience I desire. So I need to hang on to that person, that person there. And then I got something called a Helen Merrill Award, which is still given out actually. And at the time, it's a playwriting award that comes out every year, and they kind of tend to give it to people to keep encouraging them. You know, at least that was the energy of the time. So I got that, which was interesting because I was living in Berlin. I got that email and I was like, hey, this is a sign from the universe. Someone wants me to keep going, you know? And then I happened to meet this incredible man named Jim Houghton, who you know, was the founding artistic director, late great man, who was the founding artistic director of the Signature Theater, had really sort of remade in New York. Yeah, sorry, did not the DC Signature, yes. And no one really talks about this, but his philosophy was really about rescue. He had some kind of interesting relationship to the theater where he felt like there were a lot of that the winds of change and taste were often too brutal. And you know, we're cheating audiences out of their own enjoyment of what they had right in front of them. And he started that whole theater because he was like, Romulus Linney wrote some great plays. Where's Romulus Linney? And then Romulus Linney said, you should talk to my friend Edward Albee, who at the time was persona non grata. And you know, he really believed that writers should not be judged by one play.
Right.
You have to look at the larger story they're trying to tell, and that's when you can really make a call about whether or not they're worth their salt.
And that's That's when Signature would do an entire season devoted to one playwright every
Yes.
year.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Which was transformative for me because when I moved to New York, I remember it was the August Wilson season, and I bought a whole season of tickets for like $80 or something. And if you in seasons back then were like a hallowed thing to imagine having. But and it was a huge education for me as a writer to experience one writer's work. It's okay to read it, but to see it,
That's
was really profound to
In those in
understand
those
what.
in those days, it was such a big deal that the New York Times, where I was the theater reporter, we would wait to hear who the next a playwright was going to be,
Right.
and we then did a big feature about them as if that was, it became sort of like excavating these careers, and that led
Yeah.
to a whole reappreciation, a
100%.
reevaluation
Yeah.
of those writers. Maria
Which
Arvide
is
Fornes
awesome.
got a season.
I know Audrey and Kennedy had a season. These amazing.
That was
Who
huge.
now we now and it felt kind of like it felt like a MoMA retrospective. It felt like, but it was like how cool that he had this very simple idea that people were really buying into this story. Yeah, people. I mean, they were able to get a whole big build based on that
Right.
idea. Anyway, but he had this idea when he moved into this Pershing Square Center to start something called Residency 5, where he would sort of find a miniature inverted way to do that work for non sort of senior master playwrights. And those early people that he chose, which were like Will Eno, Katori Hall, Annie Baker, Kenny Lonergan, they were all like Annie, I think, had one play at the Atlantic at the time. Katori was still a student at Juilliard, but he was like, what happens if we give people a promise that we're going to do 3 plays? So don't freak out if your second play is not good. It was a really radical, and it's still no one else is doing this, right? Which is embarrassing. But anyway, he, for whatever reason, approached me after I only had my show Neighbors, and he sat me down and he was like, I want to give you 3 shows.
Got it.
And I was
Oh my
like,
God.
yeah,
I get
was
it.
like, what are you talking about? This is the opposite of what's supposed to happen, and that was really, that honestly was the kind of fulcrum of my whole career on it, if I'm being really honest. And the first show we did was appropriate.
And that makes I'm sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh no, I was going to say, because I mean, I don't like, was everybody like number 2 or 3? Was that part of that? Because that's interesting
Everybody's
to me,
the second
because
one, yeah.
I'm interested in those shows that you do where you're working from something else. Like we mentioned Enemy of the People, an adaptation, and everybody was your take on a morality play, like a medieval morality play. And then you also you had done some work on the one that was on Broadway a couple of years ago.
Skin Over Teeth.
Skin Over Teeth, right. What did you do on that? And what does it mean for you to work that kind of relationship with the text?
I think honestly that was born out of my exposure to just the German dramaturgy. I mean, that's really, that's like that's half of what they do out there, is not even more than half, is that those shows are all reworkings of classics. And I just saw some incredible, because it wasn't just about like refreshing something up, but you could really adapt something and wrestle with it, that you kind of broke open a new layer to it or a new meaning to it. And I just didn't see that happening over here. But I guess
it doesn't not to that extent.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah.
It's partly because we don't really have a canon we trust that we can do that with, right? We have all our important plays are still kind of not in public domain yet, so it's harder to, but the Rodgers and Hammerstein State wants a cut or whatever. But yeah, and ironically, everybody happened because I still want to adapt this Eugene O'Neill play called Emperor Jones.
Oh,
and,
wow.
Yeah. And the thing about Jim's cancer diagnosis was in the air, and we knew that he was dying. And I was actually working a TV job in LA. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, wait, I should just do Everyman. And I texted Jim because I realized that Everyman was influencing Emperor Jones on some level. And then he was like, so game. He was like, this is great. What do you need? And part of what he did that was brilliant over there is he would really commit to a show before you had a script, as long as you had a promise of a process, and he would help you build that process. So I was like, I want to adapt this, and he's like, okay, let's have a reading of it. We're going to schedule 5 readings. We're going to sort of,
Great.
it was very European model of like building in the institution, and we I think a lot of great things get made, and that's how that one happened. And he passed like 4 or 5 months before we premiered.
Terrible.
Yeah, it was
Great man.
Yeah, but great man, like legendary, visionary. Talk to anyone who kind of came through there. People kind of talk about him the way I think people talk about Joe Papp for a while. Granted, he was far less, in bed with the city, but
Yeah.
But spectacularly writer centered, and that was that is. We don't we have less of that now. So can we flip the cards here a little bit? But I want to get to where your head is at now and what you're working on. You have these. You're now it's now kind of like Jacobs-Jenkins Inc. We've got you got the comeuppance in process. You just finished Appropriate. You've got Purpose coming to Broadway. Are you multitasking with these things, or do you sort of let them go? And then are you working with the directors of all these plays simultaneously, or are you working in other on other platforms at the same time?
This is the weird thing about theater is the comeuppance is done. Like, I've written the comeuppance. It's happening now with Morgan Green in a co-pro with Wilma and Woolley, which I'm going to see on Saturday, which is going to be fun. So I don't really have to do anything except like answer the occasional email from her. And then Purpose, we did Purpose in the spring. There's work we're going to do on it in November, but
Felicia
it's
Rashad.
not. Yeah, with amazing Felicia Rashad. Yeah. So that was wild. That was my spring, and then this fall, I'm actually next week in rehearsals for a show called Give Me Carmelita Tropicana, which will be at Soho Rap. And
Yes,
that's like top on my mind right now, and then in the spring, a little musical called Purple Rain is supposed to happen in Minneapolis.
God.
So I try to really
that little thing. That's right.
I know, I'm so scared, but I try to not. I try to think like that, like those Jacobian playwrights who did like 2 plays a year. It's like, okay, this is my fall project and this is my spring project. And now I was just thinking, there was an era when I was actually taking secret TV jobs to just offset the work. But I think when I get to have a season like this, I don't have to do that. And that
What do you mean secret?
That feels really lucky. Well, I wouldn't talk about it, but but a lot of us are doing that during peak TV. That's how a lot of people kind of stayed in the game, because certainly these off-Broadway rates were not paying people's bills. So, but yeah, I feel like I'm getting to like do this full time in a way that is that's kind of cool, And I have like commissions that are kind of coming together. That are going to be like the next like 2 or 3 years out. So
I'm curious about your relationship with directors, because are you coming more from you're talking about like working in Berlin and being exposed to this kind of different approach to like really like revising or adapting text, but of course in the US this is kind of like bugaboo of the European director that's really going to mess up your text. But you've also worked with like great directors who have very strong ideas, like Sarah Benson, for instance. And so what is your position on that? Like, how do you see that relationship, that collaboration?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the major difference you discover in why it's great to be a playwright is that, in the English-speaking world, the playwright is the center of the room, whereas everywhere else in the world, it is very much the director.
Yeah.
And I think I'm drawn to very specific kinds of directors. And it's very easy to think that all directors are the same, but as much as any writer has a voice, I think you can really tell a great director's voice.
Oh yeah,
based on their stuff. And Sarah, not everything I do is right for Sarah. Like it's that thing where I'll be writing a play, and it'll take me a while. The last thing I think about, honestly, is director. But at some point, I'm like, oh, this actually feels like a Liliana play, or this feels like a Lila play, because I know that they have the missing thing the play needs to like find its iteration, in space. So, and the process is very different. I mean, I truly like to, I really delay folding them, except for Sarah. Sarah's a different thing, because Sarah's actually interested in big events that require like a lot of early conceptual talking, you know. But most everybody else, I kind of wait until I feel like I know what the script is before I bring them in, and then it really becomes about having someone steer an early design process, because I really believe that like the physical environment is actually a huge part of the what you're designing, you know. And then I really try to stay out of the way in the room. I try not to talk in the room, because I like in the rehearsal room, because I just think that's where the division of labor kind of stops, you know. And I really like act directors who are like, either you got to be like a design freak, or I need you to be like incredible with actors. Like that's sort of my, or you know, someone like Lila who you get who's like right in that sweet spot, you know. But yeah, I just find that it's very much about like having a co-pilot, you know, try to. And I feel like my job is to design the game board, but they're supposed to like teach people how to play it or something. It's very.
So you write more for
thing.
directors than for actors? Do you
No.
write with actors in mind?
I have some actors. I have to kind of know that actor really well to do that successfully. But I do.
Sure.
I mean, I feel like, but the plays I really love, I have begun to feel like one of the great pleasures for me is like tailoring a role to an actor or something. And that was like the great fun of working at Steppenwolf. It's like when they commission you there, you have to write with their ensemble in mind, and you got to find the actors, you know. And that's fun for me. I feel like I do feel like I'm a tailor, you know.
Oh,
but
I love that.
Directors are there's no reason to write for directors. That's not. It seems like a
I
waste
hear
of
you.
time.
Got
you
it.
know?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Well, this is really fun talking to you.
Oh my God.
Branden.
Already over. If I just yacked for an hour, Jesus.
Yeah. You've been.
I know. We went into some kind of like
zone.
Multiverse zone where time stopped.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you guys questions? Like, what are you guys excited about this season?
Well, I'm really excited about your show at Soho Rip, because the meeting of you and Carmelita Tropicana. Let's talk about Carmelita as just as the Carmelita entity.
Yes, so you know Carmelita.
I don't know her personally, but I know her work, and that is a meeting of minds that I'm super curious about, because I always love things where I'm thinking, wow, I would not have pictured these two people in the same room working together. But that to me is what interests me in a show. I'm really, really happy. Like when I saw the announcement for that show, I was like, that is so weird. I love it.
She's my teacher. She's my.
She what?
She taught me performance art.
Okay. Well, you learned from
I know from a great.
Yeah, you learned from
I think I want to see Branden in his own performance piece at some point. I think that's gonna. That was another biographical detail that he glanced over. He said, "Well, I was thinking of being a performance artist, but blah 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 blah." So I don't know. I
think that ship may have sailed, Peter. I think, unfortunately,
I don't know.
We must let the past be the past.
Damn it.
I've got to
Are
say,
you guys feeling optimistic?
Oh, like like about the world,
like
or
do
about
we feel theater? We're not, and let's not talk about the world, but like in terms of where the theater. I mean, I know, Peter, you're going to watch all the Broadway has to offer, but I've been talking to a lot of friends about like what's going on. Like, do people feel like something good is afoot, or are we all just miserable, or what's the?
No, I think there's a healthy period of development happening. There's some really smart artistic directors. This new generation coming in is exciting. I think regional listen, the DC theater world has never had a more interesting assemblage of artistic directors. It's a really smart. So I think that, and I do think, what I think has to happen is, you're talking so much about German theater. I do think there needs to be much. We do have to think about a global context for what's happening in theater. And I'm as excited as anything. I go to Poland every year now to a festival to see Polish theater. And
which one?
It's the Boska Komedia. It's the Divine Comedy Festival in Krakow.
Oh wow!
And they bring the best Polish pieces for the year to Krakow in December, and it's really important. I went to Chile to a festival earlier this year. It's where I find I get so revved up. Seeing seeing that there are other modes than the ones that, you're not a good example, Branden, because you create on such a high caliber pieces that are so urgently watchable and so entertaining at the same time as they're provocative, that that's what I look for. That's what I want to see in theater.
Well,
And that is not happening enough.
Well, that is what I would say. That is the one thing that really sends me into pits of despair, is that it feels like the international pipeline of non-English speaking theater is gone.
It's gone.
I mean,
It's
you
gone.
remember when there would be the next wave at BAM, and we would see all this crazy stuff, that Belgian King Lear, where like 2/3 of the audience left, in a half, or like that kind of stuff we don't see at all. It's gone. Like when Lincoln Center Festival would bring these enormous Nushkin productions that probably cost
I saw that.
so much. I can't even imagine how much it costs to bring that stuff over. Like, where's
I'm
that? We don't.
optimistic.
You are? I'm really not. I don't think
am.
we're going to see that.
I am. No, I'm optimistic that that we go through phases, and we are still in recovery mode. It's going to take, for the 18, 20 months that we were out, it's going to take 5 years to get back. And I see signs that, audiences they have not abandoned the theater. They just haven't, and that takes, a collective effort of belief. I at the long run, I am generally sunny about the prospects for theater.
I would say I am optimistic in general, except for that international thing that I was just talking about. I think this is just like really as bad.
I think that's really
as
real. I think
it's-
that's really real. I think because when I came here, the Next Big Festival was a huge education,
Oh,
and the
my
Lincoln Center
God.
Festival existed too. I mean, that's Christian Lupa. Like these people.
Oh my God, Christian
There's
Lupa.
no way I would see them.
No.
I can't believe you two are talking about Christian Lupa. I may have to
You gotta
move in
go.
with both
You
of
just
you
gotta
now.
I think
Three's Company. I'm
we
interested in this.
we need to
Yeah.
clamor
Thanks,
for
company.
like
That's funny. What happens when a playwright moves in with two critics? I think that might be that's a good play, man.
Can I make my like pitch to what critics I wish critics would do? I wish you guys would do season report cards of institutions. Because I think that what happens is we get a little too what's the word, like too obsessed with like show by show by show. But people who get away with murder are the people programming these shows. And I actually think that a lot of what's happening in the field, we're still blaming COVID, but I think a lot of what's happening is programming, because there've been the theaters that are doing well in the city programmed very well last year. And I think everybody knows what those theaters are. And I always feel like, why don't critics ever go like, let's talk about this theater's season and what the story is they think they were telling. Because I think that those institutions need feedback in order to, I think the work that you're talking about is actually kind of out there, but you meet these institutions that are too afraid to do it, or they don't see, they're worried that it's going to be too much of a risk. And I feel like the buck winds up stopping with the artist, as opposed to being like, well, what if someone said like, this was a boring season, you guys. I'll just say like Second Stage, she's retired. So it's like, Second Stage, what was this season? And really talk about like, well, how do you assess the story that you're telling the audiences? If you're really trying to bring audiences back, they need more than just the hope that like a 6-week run of something in March is going to keep them going. They want to, this is why the signature worked,
Right.
It was a year-long story that you could tell to people. You could grow audiences with that. And I just feel like I'm missing that long view.
Well, I think that's something we could take on, Peter. We could take on
briefly, because we should let Branden have a life. But I will say that with the whole model for how people the whole model for how people choose plays has changed, and it's no longer the case that people buy seasons. And I think that has influenced the way we evaluate the theater. People are single ticket buyers. They buy on impulse much more than they used to. They don't even, and it puts much more pressure on theaters to make everything a hit, make everything something that is popular. There's very little room now.
But that's chicken and the egg.
True,
right?
I agree.
in
I
the sense
agree.
that like they stopped buying seasons because they were like, this is a waste of money. So we're going to hold
Yeah.
out for the one hit in the year. Whereas, and this has, I mean, there are people like the foundations have a lot to do with this because, places like MTC sold a season because they were like, come here for the new plays. This
Right.
is where the new plays happen. But then suddenly all the foundations were funding new play development. Everyone had new plays. Now places like Second Stage, whose brand was built on being the second production of plays, are
Right.
doing
Yeah.
new plays. And
Well,
it just, I think, yeah. Go
and
ahead. Sorry.
it feels also that it's circling back to something we had talked about earlier, is that some of it is kind of a kind of ad hoc scheduling based on that star that you want to get, or the only way to fund your production is to get that one star who wants to do that show. And so whenever that star is free, that's when it's going to happen. So if it means that it's going to mess up the rest of your season, so
Right.
be it, because you're going to have that one show, that you're kind of putting a lot of effort on it, and it's based on a particular star's availability. Like, when was George Clooney's available to do his show? Well, that's when it's going to happen,
Yeah, we still don't
That's-
know. Right. They still haven't announced
Right.
the dates.
Well,
Yeah.
why do you have to be so detail-oriented? Dates. Who thinks about dates when you're talking about George Clooney? That is so pedestrian.
Well,
Okay.
we will, in our second hour, how to fix the theater.
That's right.
We will, yeah. Anyway,
God.
Epic.
we should
Epic.
wrap this lovely discussion up.
Nushkin length podcast.
Yeah. This was without intermission, so we got to think about people having bathroom breaks. But they can walk with their
That's right.
their laptop to the bathroom. Anyway,
Of course,
well,
that's
anyway,
what they
listen.
do.
The Comeuppance is at Woolly Mammoth until October 6th in D.C. And Purpose, directed by Felicia Rashad, starts performances on February 25th at the Helen Hayes. That's Branden's second Broadway play. So thank you, Branden.
Thank you, guys. This was really fun.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, that was great, Elizabeth. Branden is a great guest.
Oh my
and,
God. I want to hang
I-
out with him forever.
I know. He's just one of those guys.
Well, that's the thing.
people,
The
one of
thing is,
those
like, I
theater
want to hang out with
artists.
all of our guests forever.
I know.
Like, I spend 40
we
minutes with
bond.
them, and then I'm like, I want to be your friend,
It's-
which ethically I cannot do, but
It's the spirit of that. It's not the fact of that.
yes.
Writers give good interview, they really do.
Yeah. And also actors and directors. Like theater people, I would say in general, because I really do think that they're less media trained than Hollywood people. They're kind of more interesting.
And let's give ourselves credit for providing a safe space for them.
Yes,
It's like
yes.
they know they're going to have a worthy exchange of ideas.
Yes, with
us.
people who have seen their work, unlike some of the journalists that sometimes you see interviewing actors or writers.
sure.
That's pretty clear
Well-
they haven't read the book. So that's,
Yeah, indeed.
I would say for the
Indeed.
most
No,
part, we've seen the shows. No, I'm kidding. We have seen the shows.
you can tell the difference too in the conversations.
Absolutely.
And anyway, that's it for us. Till next time, I'm Peter Marks.
And I'm Elizabeth Vincentielli. We have a favor. If you love us in this podcast, subscribe, keep us trucking. Marks Vincentielli at substack.com.
Not at.
Oh, yeah,
Substack.
that's right. I am a little tired today.
I hear ya.
Substack.com. But really, it's our names. How hard is it to Google? Not very, I can tell you that.
Well, some people really need specific direct instructions. And if there's anyone in particular you'd like us to interview, we're open to suggestions.
Absolutely.
Always write to us. I'm on Facebook and Threads. Elizabeth, where do you hang out these days? I don't want to make any assumptions.
No, well, I am on Threads, and that other place sometimes I do check out. But I have never been on Facebook ever, so yeah, isn't that weird? But yeah.
No.
When I
everyone
thought
has their
about it,
own-
it was so late that I thought, no, I'm not going to join Facebook now when everybody's leaving it. So
Yeah, I hear
felt
you. No.
awkward.
It's yeah, I get it. I totally get it. And if you're on Instagram or something, then you're on Meta anyway.
that's right. And I use WhatsApp all the time, so I am on Meta, but I just don't.
There you go.
Oh my
Well,
God. That
all
was
right.
such a good show. I love Branden.
Yeah, I know it gets your adrenaline going, and we have to come down from it. We'll be with you again soon for another edition of Marx and Vincitelli, the podcast, not the law firm. Till next time.